The sky broke apart on a Tuesday. Major David Roth stood on the observation deck of Forward Base Sentinel, coffee mug halfway to his lips, as the atmosphere turned the color of burning copper. The mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the deck plating, but he barely registered the sound. Massive shapes punctured the clouds, dozens, then hundreds of them. Black obsidian teardrops, their surfaces rippling like oil on water, descending with the precision of synchronized swimmers. The estimated scale was all wrong. Intel had claimed the Vraxian vessels were corvette class at best. These were dreadnoughts. General quarters, he whispered, then finding his voice, General quarters. The base klaxons had just begun to wail when the first beam struck. A column of coherent light, blindingly white at its core with tendrils of electric blue, connected the lead vessel to the surface of Earth 60 kilometers east of the base. Where the city of Denver had stood moments before, a perfect hemisphere of earth and rock vaporized. The shockwave hit Sentinel 3 seconds later, nearly knocking Roth off his feet. His tactical display lit up as worldwide communications flooded in. Seoul, Shanghai, London, New York, Mexico City, Kinshasa. One by one, humanity's population centers vanished from the earth, replaced by perfect craters of glass and steam. Major. We need orders, sir. Captain Alice Franklin appeared at his side, her face streaked with blood from a gash on her forehead. Roth forced himself to look away from the apocalyptic scene unfolding beyond the armored windows. Status report. Worldwide casualties estimated at 1.4 billion and climbing. All major military installations either hit or targeted. No effective countermeasures deployed. The UN Secretary-General attempted contact, but Franklin's voice caught. They vaporized the building mid-transmission. No warning. No demands. Roth's voice sounded hollow even to himself. They're not here to conquer. This is extermination. The observation deck shuddered as a nearby mountain peak disappeared in a flash of light. Roth grabbed Franklin's arm, pulling her toward the elevator. Activate Protocol Lazarus. Now. Franklin's eyes widened. Sir, that's still experimental. We don't know if. Captain, in 20 minutes there won't be enough humans left alive to field a softball team. Execute the order. The command bunker, buried 2 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, buzzed with controlled panic. Screens displayed real-time satellite feeds of the devastation spreading across every continent. The death toll counter in the corner of the main display had stopped updating after reaching 2 billion. Dr. Isabel Martinez, head of Special Weapons Research, looked up from her terminal as Roth entered. Her normally immaculate lab coat was wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes betraying the 72 hours she'd spent in the bunker since the first anomalous readings had appeared. You're authorizing Lazarus? She asked, already knowing the answer. Roth nodded, placing his palm on the biometric scanner. How long until deployment? 15 minutes to initialize the network, another 10 to achieve global saturation. Will it work? Martinez hesitated. Theoretically. We've never tested it against Vraxian tech. The simulations suggest a 78% probability of successful interface, but we don't know if it will stop them, Roth finished. No. We don't. A young lieutenant rushed to Roth's side. Sir, we have visual confirmation. They're deploying ground forces. The main screen switched to a live feed from what remained of Chicago. Black shapes moved through the ruins with mechanical precision. They resembled insects scaled to human proportions, 6-limbed, with segmented bodies and crystalline protrusions where a head should be. Each carried what looked like twisted branches of dark metal that pulsed with the same blue energy as their ships. As they moved, they methodically fired into half-collapsed buildings, ensuring no survivors. A child broke cover, running in blind panic across an ash-covered street. 3 of the creatures turned, their weapons discharging simultaneously. The child disappeared in a flash of blue light. Roth felt something break inside him, a dam holding back emotions he couldn't afford. The rage that flooded through was clarifying, focusing his mind to a razor's edge. "How many?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. "Current estimate is 50 million ground troops worldwide," Franklin responded, reading from her tablet. "Our remaining forces number less than 400,000 combat-ready personnel." "And the civilian population?" Franklin's face was grim. "Surviving population centers are falling rapidly. Maybe 500 million left. 7 billion to 500 million in less than an hour." Roth's mind struggled to comprehend the scale of death. "Major," Martinez said quietly, "you need to see this." She pulled up a new feed on a secondary screen. It showed the aftermath of a Vraxian attack on a small town. As the aliens moved through the ruins, they were collecting something. Extracting small luminous wisps from the bodies of the dead. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "I believe they're harvesting neural energy." Martinez's voice was clinical, but her hands trembled. "The electromagnetic pattern generated by human consciousness. We've theorized it could be extracted and stored, but never developed the technology." Roth stared at the screen. "They're not just killing us. They're taking our souls." "I wouldn't use that terminology, but effectively, yes." A technician called out from across the room. "Lazarus initialization at 85%, sir. 10 minutes to deployment." Roth moved to the center of the command bunker. "Listen up. In 10 minutes, we deploy our only countermeasure. Until then, we need to buy time." He turned to Franklin. "Activate all remaining orbital platforms. Target their dropships, not the capital vessels. We can't penetrate those shields. Delay their ground forces however possible." "Yes, sir." "Dr. Martinez, I need every detail on their harvest operation. If we understand what they want, we might find a weakness." Martinez nodded, already diving back into her analysis. Roth stepped to a communications terminal. "This is Major David Roth, authorization Sierra, Echo, 7-2-9, Delta. I am assuming strategic command under Extinction Protocol. All surviving military and civilian assets, this is not a conventional invasion. This is genocide." He paused, finding the words. "We stand at the precipice of human extinction. But we are not without resources. In approximately 9 minutes, we will deploy our response. Until then, prioritize civilian evacuation to designated Lazarus nodes. These locations are being transmitted on all emergency frequencies now." On the main screen, orbital defense satellites began engaging the smaller Vraxian vessels, destroying several before return fire obliterated them. A small victory, but meaningless against their numbers. "Dr. Martinez." Roth called. "What happens when Lazarus activates?" Martinez looked up from her station. "Every network device on Earth will become part of the defense grid. Civilian tech, military systems, even dormant infrastructure, all synchronized and weaponized simultaneously. And the Orpheus component?" Her eyes met his. "Untested, sir. It will attempt to interface with Vraxian systems, reverse engineer their communication protocols, and inject our countermeasures directly into their network. In English, Doctor. We're going to hack them. Turn their own systems against them." She hesitated. "There's a risk. Orpheus requires direction. A guiding intelligence." Roth understood. "You need a pilot." "Yes. Direct neural interface. Someone has to guide the system through their network." The bunker fell silent as everyone realized what that meant. "How long would the pilot have?" Roth asked. "Minutes. Maybe less. Neural burnout is inevitable at the processing speeds required." Roth nodded slowly. "I'll do it." "Sir, Franklin protested, "We need your tactical expertise here." "There's no time to debate, Captain." Roth's voice was firm. "Prepare the interface." As Martinez led him to the neural link chamber, Roth caught a final glimpse of the main screen. Another Vraxian beam was striking somewhere in Europe. Another million lives gone in an instant. He thought of his wife and daughter in Boston. The city had been among the first hit. He pushed the grief down, converting it to cold resolve. The neural chamber was a simple chair surrounded by a halo of delicate instruments. Martinez worked quickly, attaching electrodes to Roth's temples and the base of his skull. "It will feel invasive," she warned. "Your consciousness will be stretched across every node in the system. You'll see through millions of interfaces simultaneously." Roth closed his eyes as the final connections were made. "How long until activation?" 2 minutes, 17 seconds, Martinez answered, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Major, you should know, we don't know if you can come back from this." "Doesn't matter." Roth opened his eyes. "They came to erase us from existence, Doctor. To harvest our very essence. But they don't understand what they're facing." The countdown reached 1 minute. "Humanity isn't just flesh and blood," Roth continued, his voice gaining strength. "We're ideas. We're will. And now we're going to show them exactly what that means." The interface began to hum. Roth felt the first tendrils of the system reaching into his mind. "Tell the survivors," he said, his eyes meeting Martinez's, "that from this moment on, we fight back. This is no longer an extinction, it's a war." The Lazarus Protocol activated, and Major David Roth's consciousness exploded outward, racing through digital pathways to meet humanity's executioners. The first battle for Earth's survival had begun. Pain. Unimaginable, all-consuming pain as David Roth's consciousness fractured into millions of shards, each racing through the global network. He was everywhere and nowhere, in dormant defense systems in Antarctica, in a teenager's smartphone in the rubble of Sydney, in traffic control grids beneath the smoldering remains of London. And then, suddenly, clarity. "I am the network. The network is me." He could see the Vraxian ships through 10,000 different sensors simultaneously. Could feel their communications as pulses of alien mathematics flooding the airwaves. Their language was complex but decipherable, packets of quantum-encrypted data that Roth's enhanced consciousness began to unravel. His first strike was simple but devastating. In Hong Kong, where Vraxian ground forces had established a harvesting center, every autonomous vehicle suddenly activated. Trucks, cars, and drones slammed into the aliens with suicidal precision. Simultaneously, power grids overloaded, smart buildings locked down, and automated defense turrets, designed for crowd control but repurposed through Lazarus, opened fire. "Major? Can you hear me?" Dr. Martinez's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I can hear you," Roth replied, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking aloud or just thinking the words. "The Orpheus component is working. I'm inside their network, but they've detected the intrusion. They're trying to lock me out. We're monitoring your neural patterns. The strain is significant. You need to find allies." "Allies?" "Yes." Roth reached out through the network, searching for other nodes of human resistance. He found them, scattered, desperate, but alive. Colonel James Takahashi stepped over the body of a Vraxian scout, its crystalline head shattered by his tactical shotgun. The basement of the former Pentagon had become a last-stand position for what remained of the Joint Chiefs. "Conventional weapons can kill them," he reported to the group of officers huddled around a makeshift command table. "But only at close range, and they adapt quickly." General Rebecca Ward, the highest-ranking survivor, nodded grimly. "We've received reports of similar successful engagements worldwide, but we're talking about isolated victories against scout units. Their main force is deploying methodically. A lieutenant manning a jury-rigged communications array suddenly stiffened. "Ma'am, I'm receiving a transmission unlike anything I've ever seen. It's coming through my neural implant." The military-grade neural implants, standard for high-level officers, were supposed to be unhackable. The room tensed, weapons raised. "Stand down. I'm one of you." The voice resonated in the minds of everyone with an implant. Takahashi felt a presence in his thoughts, familiar yet vastly expanded. "Identify yourself," demanded Ward. "Major David Roth, Forward Base Sentinel. I'm operating through the Lazarus Protocol. We've weaponized Earth's digital infrastructure against the Vraxians." Takahashi exchanged glances with Ward. Everyone had heard rumors about Lazarus, but few believed it actually existed. "I don't have much time," Roth continued. "My consciousness is fragmenting. I need you to coordinate ground forces while I disrupt their network. I'm sending tactical data now." Information flooded into their neural implants, Vraxian positions, vulnerabilities, communication frequencies. "How are you accessing this?" Ward asked. "I'm inside their systems. They're vulnerable to our quantum decryption methods, something they never anticipated." Arrogance. "They've conquered so many worlds, they never considered we might have technologies they don't understand." Takahashi felt a chill. "What are they doing with the harvested neural energy?" A pause. "Fuel. They consume consciousness itself. Other species, other civilizations, all reduced to energy sources. We're just the latest crop." "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. "Listen carefully. Lazarus has activated 3 types of assets: digital weapons through our network infrastructure, kinetic weapons through automated systems, and human forces through neural interfaces like yours. I need you to gather survivors at these coordinates." Maps appeared in their minds, showing 12 locations worldwide. These are sanctuary points, hardened facilities with experimental shielding. The Vraxians can't detect them. Each contains prototype weapons developed under Project Prometheus. Ward straightened. Prometheus was theoretical, directed energy weapons reverse-engineered from the Proxima Centauri signal. Not theoretical. Operational. But you need to move fast. I can only maintain this level of network disruption for another 6 hours before neural degradation becomes problematic. Takahashi understood the euphemism. Roth was burning himself out. "We'll coordinate globally," Ward decided. "Takahashi, take a team and secure the North American sanctuary point. One more thing," Roth added. "Find Dr. Eliza Blackwood. She's at the Berkeley Underground facility. She's developed something called the Nexus Protocol, an extension of Lazarus that might turn the tide." "How do we contact you again?" Takahashi asked. "You don't need to. I'm always listening. Always watching. Now go." Across San Francisco Bay, Dr. Eliza Blackwood stared at the body on her laboratory table. The dead Vraxian looked less insectoid up close, more like a mollusk whose evolutionary path had taken a hard turn toward the crystalline. Its 6 limbs ended in manipulators similar to human hands, though with 7 digits. "The neural architecture is fascinating," she said to her small team of surviving researchers. "Their consciousness exists as a quantum field distributed throughout the crystalline structures. No central brain. Which explains why headshots don't reliably kill them," noted Dr. Marcus Reynolds, wiping blood from his glasses. The former linguistics professor had taken up arms when the Berkeley campus was hit. "Is there anything we can use?" Blackwood nodded, gesturing to the neural interface chamber in the corner of the lab. "Similar to the one Roth had used, but modified. The Nexus Protocol. It's an expansion of Lazarus, designed to create a shared neural network between multiple human pilots. Distributed consciousness, like theirs, but more adaptable. And more dangerous," Reynolds countered. The simulations showed catastrophic neural feedback in 83% of scenarios. That was before we had a viable Vraxian specimen. Blackwood extracted a crystalline fragment from the alien's chest cavity. Their neural relays can stabilize our network. One pilot directs, others provide processing power. Before Reynolds could object, the lab's security doors hissed open. A squad of soldiers entered, led by a blood-spattered Asian man with colonel's insignia. "Dr. Eliza Blackwood?" he asked. She straightened. "Who's asking?" "Colonel James Takahashi. Major Roth sent me." Blackwood's eyes widened. "Roth activated Lazarus. Is he alive, technically, but spread thin?" Takahashi surveyed the lab. "He said you have something that might save what's left of humanity." Blackwood gestured to the Nexus chamber. "I need volunteers. Strong minds who can withstand neural pressure without fragmenting." "For what purpose?" "To create a human hive mind that can match theirs." Aboard the Vraxian command vessel, Supreme Harvester Vorlath experienced the closest emotion to confusion its species could feel. The monitoring tendrils connected to its neural cluster displayed cascading failures across their harvesting network. The prey species has deployed unexpected countermeasures, it communicated to the Harvest Command Collective. Their digital infrastructure has become weaponized. "Impossible," came the collective response. Pre-invasion analysis indicated primitive neural technology. No species has ever resisted harvest phase. Vorlath extended a manipulator toward the viewing field, where Earth's surface was displayed in real time. Bright flares indicated successful harvesting operations, but small dark spots had appeared, areas where harvesters had gone silent. "This species is different. They have developed a distributed attack system that mimics our own neural architecture. Crude, but effective. The primary architect appears to be a single consciousness fragmented across their network. Identify and extract this consciousness. Add it to the sovereign collection. Attempts have failed. It exists everywhere and nowhere." The Harvest Command was silent for a moment, the equivalent of stunned disbelief in their species. "This changes nothing," they finally responded. "Accelerate the harvest. Deploy the world breakers." Vorlath signaled compliance, but a new sensation rippled through its neural network, the faintest trace of what humans would call concern. Roth felt the shift in the Vraxian command structure immediately. New orders cascading down, adjustments to their strategy. They were escalating. Through thousands of cameras, sensors, and interfaces, he watched as new ships descended through the atmosphere. Larger vessels, with massive energy signatures that dwarfed anything seen before. World breakers. He redirected his focus to Berkeley, where Takahashi had secured Blackwood's laboratory. Through security cameras, he watched as the Nexus chamber was prepared. 5 volunteers, 3 soldiers and 2 scientists, were being connected to the neural interface. "The Nexus needs a primary consciousness to organize around," Blackwood was explaining. "Someone with exceptional mental discipline and pattern recognition abilities." "I'll do it," Takahashi volunteered. "No," Reynolds interjected. "You're needed to coordinate ground forces." "I'll pilot." Roth watched the preparations with growing urgency. His fractured consciousness was beginning to degrade. Calculations that had been instantaneous now took microseconds, an eternity in digital warfare. The Vraxians were adapting, isolating segments of their network, cutting off his access. And the world breakers were moving into position above Earth's major fault lines. They weren't just planning to harvest humanity. They were going to crack the planet open like an egg. "Dr. Blackwood," he projected into the lab's systems. "You need to activate Nexus now. The Vraxians are deploying terraforming weapons." Blackwood looked up sharply. "We're not ready. The integration protocols. No time. Do it now." As Reynolds was connected to the primary node, Roth made a decision. He gathered the fragments of his consciousness, pulling back from millions of systems worldwide, concentrating his essence. Colonel Takahashi, he communicated. Get to the North American sanctuary point. Activate Prometheus. You have less than 3 hours before the world breakers initiate planetary fracturing. What about you, Major? Takahashi asked. I'm going to give Dr. Reynolds and the Nexus team something the Vraxians won't expect. Which is? A map. I've been inside their network, seen their entire command structure. I'm going to transfer everything I've learned directly into the Nexus. The neural strain will kill what's left of me. I know. Small price to pay. Roth turned his attention to the Nexus chamber, where Reynolds and the others were now fully connected. He gathered his consciousness into a tight bundle of pure information and hurled himself toward Berkeley. As his awareness left the global network, he caught one final glimpse of the Vraxian command ship. Something was emerging from its core, a crystalline structure the size of a small mountain, pulsing with the harvested consciousness of countless species. The true face of the enemy was revealing itself. And humanity was preparing to fight back. Dr. Marcus Reynolds screamed as Major Roth's consciousness slammed into the Nexus. It wasn't pain, it was information overload, like trying to pour an ocean through a garden hose. The other 4 connected minds stabilized, distributing the burden, but Reynolds remained the focal point where Roth's fragmented essence converged. Neural patterns critical. Dr. Blackwood shouted, fingers flying across the control panel. He's going into shock. Inside the Nexus, Reynolds felt himself drowning in alien data, Vraxian battle plans, ship schematics, tactical algorithms developed across thousands of harvested worlds. And beneath it all, Roth's fading personality, dissolving into the collective like sugar in hot water. Don't fight it, came Roth's voice, barely recognizable. Let the patterns flow through you. Reynolds surrendered, allowing his consciousness to expand. The Nexus stabilized, 5 human minds plus Roth's remnants forming a new entity, a hybrid intelligence with access to both Lazarus and the Vraxian network. Connection stable, Blackwood announced, relief evident in her voice. Nexus is online. Reynolds opened his eyes, though his real body seemed distant and unimportant. Through the Nexus, he could see what Roth had seen, the world through countless digital eyes. The world breakers are in position, he said, his voice oddly flat. We have 2 hours and 43 minutes until planetary fracturing begins. Colonel Takahashi, already halfway to the door with his strike team, paused. Can you disrupt them? Not directly. Their systems are isolated from the main Vraxian network. Reynolds tilted his head as information from the Nexus flowed through him. But we can coordinate a counterattack through the sanctuary points. Then that's the plan. Takahashi checked his weapon. Blackwood, keep the Nexus operational. We'll establish a forward base at the sanctuary point and deploy Prometheus. Reynolds watched them leave, his perception split between the physical world and the digital landscape where humanity's desperate resistance was taking shape. They're underestimating us, he said to no one in particular. And that's our only advantage. The North American sanctuary point was buried beneath the ruins of what had once been NORAD, a facility designed to withstand nuclear war, now serving as humanity's last hope against extinction. Takahashi's team arrived to find General Ward already there, coordinating with surviving military units worldwide. The massive underground chamber hummed with activity as technicians prepared 12 devices that resembled artillery shells, each glowing with an eerie blue light. Prometheus, Ward explained, gesturing to the weapons. Reverse-engineered from the Proxima Centauri signal. They generate focused quantum disruption fields that should, in theory, destabilize Vraxian neural clusters. In theory? Takahashi asked. We've never had live targets until today. Ward's expression was grim. We'll deploy them through modified ICBMs. The Vraxians have neutralized most of our missile silos, but we've hidden launch systems in 12 locations they haven't detected. Takahashi nodded. How soon can we launch? 30 minutes. But there's a problem. Ward brought up a tactical display showing Earth from orbit. The world breakers are positioned above the planet's major fault lines, but they're protected by energy shields we can't penetrate from the ground. So we need to take down the shields first. Yes. And we need coordination with the other sanctuary points for a simultaneous strike. Takahashi activated his neural implant. Reynolds, we need access to the Vraxian shield generators. Working on it, came the reply, Reynolds' voice overlaid with digital harmonics. The Nexus has identified a vulnerability. The shields are generated from the harvester vessels, the ones collecting neural energy from Earth's surface. Can we destroy them? No need. We can hijack them. Across what remained of Earth's cities, the battle intensified. Lazarus controlled drones, vehicles, and automated defense systems engaged Vraxian ground forces wherever they appeared. Sanctuary point teams deployed worldwide, armed with conventional weapons augmented by smaller Prometheus devices. In the shattered remnants of Tokyo, resistance fighters led by Commander Yumi Sato ambushed a harvester team, disrupting the extraction of neural energy from a refugee center. In Brazil, indigenous tribes armed with Prometheus-enhanced weapons destroyed a Vraxian landing vessel. Each victory was small, but they began to accumulate. Through it all, the Nexus coordinated, predicted, and adapted, a human hive mind fighting an alien one. Supreme Harvester Vorlath observed the unexpected resistance with growing concern. The prey species was organizing more effectively than any previously harvested civilization. Small defeats were mounting, harvester efficiency dropping to unacceptable levels. The world breakers will commence planetary fracturing in 73 minutes, it communicated to the collective. But harvest completion is now projected at below 40%. Unacceptable, came the response. The energy requirements for the next dimensional shift cannot be met at those levels. The prey species has developed unexpected capabilities. They are targeting harvesters with precision. A pause in the collective consciousness, the equivalent of consideration. Deploy the Sovereign Collection. Alarm rippled through Vorlatha's neural cluster. Is that necessary? The collection is meant for. Deploy it. This resistance ends now. In the Berkeley lab, Reynolds convulsed suddenly, blood trickling from his nose. Something's happening, he gasped. Something big. Blackwood rushed to his side. Neural patterns are spiking. What are you seeing? They're releasing something. A weapon unlike anything we've encountered. Reynolds' eyes widened. Oh God. It's not a weapon. It's them. Through the Nexus, he watched as a massive crystalline structure emerged from the Vraxian command ship. It resembled a geometric snowflake the size of a small city, each facet pulsing with captured consciousness, billions of harvested minds from countless species, forced into a collective intelligence serving the Vraxians. The Sovereign Collection, the accumulated neural energy of every civilization they had destroyed. As it unfurled in Earth's atmosphere, tendrils of energy reached downward, connecting to every Vraxian on the planet. Their capabilities instantly multiplied, harvesting accelerated, and defenses strengthened. At the North American Sanctuary Point, the tactical displays suddenly blazed with new alerts. We've lost contact with the European and Asian Sanctuary Points, a technician reported. Harvester efficiency has increased by 300%. They're cutting through our defenses like they weren't even there. Ward turned to Takahashi. What the hell just happened? Before he could answer, Reynolds' voice came through their neural implants, strained and desperate. They've deployed their reserve energy supply, the consciousness of every species they've harvested. We need to launch Prometheus now, ready or not. We're still calculating firing solutions, Ward objected. And the shields? No time. The Nexus is attempting to hijack the harvester vessels, but the Sovereign Collection is fighting us for control. Launch in 10 minutes or there won't be enough of humanity left to save. Takahashi looked at Ward. Launch countdown initiated. 10 minutes. Around the world, the tide turned against humanity. The enhanced Vraxians moved with terrifying efficiency, harvesting neural energy at unprecedented rates. Resistant strongholds fell one after another. The death toll, already in the billions, climbed higher. In Berkeley, the Nexus team fought a losing battle against the Sovereign Collection, a psychic war between 5 human minds and billions of enslaved consciousnesses. "We can't hold them," one of the connected scientists gasped, blood pouring from her ears. "There are too many." Reynolds felt the pressure building, the Nexus buckling under the assault. Through their connection, he sensed the other team members beginning to fade, neural burnout imminent. Then, from the depths of the Nexus, came a familiar presence. Major David Roth, or what remained of him. Not alone, came his voice, fragmented but determined. Never alone. Behind Roth's consciousness, Reynolds sensed others, thousands of them. Human minds harvested by the Vraxians but not yet fully integrated into the collection. Conscious, aware, and angry. "They made a mistake," Roth continued. "They collected us, but they didn't break us. We've been fighting from the inside." Reynolds understood. The harvested humans, they're still in there, still fighting. Yes. And now we give them a weapon. Through the Nexus, Roth channeled a signal into the Sovereign Collection, the Lazarus Protocol, transmitted directly into the harvested human minds. A digital uprising from within the Vraxians' greatest weapon. At the sanctuary point, the countdown reached 1 minute when alarms suddenly silenced. "What's happening?" Ward demanded. A technician looked up in disbelief. "The harvester shields, they're fluctuating. We're getting gaps in coverage." Takahashi's neural implant activated. "It's working," Reynolds said, his voice stronger now. "The harvested humans are fighting back from inside the collection. They're disrupting shield control. Launch now." "Fire." Ward commanded. Worldwide, 12 ICBMs launched simultaneously from hidden silos, each carrying a Prometheus device. They streaked toward the world breakers, passing through momentary gaps in the defensive screens. On the tactical display, 11 missiles reached their targets. The 12th was intercepted at the last moment. The Prometheus devices detonated, engulfing the world breakers in expanding spheres of blue energy. Where the quantum disruption fields touched Vraxian technology, it began to destabilize, crystalline structures vibrating, then fracturing. 11 of the 12 world breakers disintegrated, their harvested energy dispersing harmlessly into the atmosphere. But one remained. The largest world breaker, positioned above the Pacific Ring of Fire, began to power up its planet-cracking beam. "We missed one," Ward said quietly. Takahashi closed his eyes. "Reynolds, we need options." Through the neural implant came not Reynolds' voice, but a chorus, thousands of harvested human minds speaking as one. "We'll give you more than options. We'll give you a miracle." The Sovereign Collection, still suspended in Earth's atmosphere, began to change. Portions of the massive crystalline structure turned against itself as harvested human consciousnesses fought for control. Energy tendrils that had strengthened the Vraxian forces now weakened them. Supreme Harvester Vorlath felt its control slipping as the collection fragmented. The prey species had somehow turned its greatest weapon against itself. Unprecedented. Impossible. "The world breaker must fire now," it commanded. "Complete the fracturing sequence." But as the final world breaker charged its beam, the collection's disruption reached critical mass. A shockwave of released consciousness energy rippled through the Vraxian fleet. And the battle entered its most desperate phase. The shockwave from the Sovereign Collection rippled across the battlefield. Vraxian ground forces faltered mid-strike, their movements becoming erratic as harvested human consciousnesses fought for control from within. The last world breaker, its planet-cracking beam half-charged, wobbled in low orbit. Inside the Nexus, Dr. Marcus Reynolds felt the tide turning. The 5 connected minds of his team were no longer fighting alone, they had allies within the enemy's own weapon. Through their shared consciousness, he felt Roth's presence growing stronger as more harvested minds rallied to their cause. "We're gaining control," Reynolds announced, blood still trickling from his nose. "But it's not enough to stop the last world breaker completely." Dr. Blackwood studied the monitors. "Your neural patterns are stabilizing. How is that possible?" "The harvested minds are creating a buffer, distributing the load." Reynolds closed his eyes, focusing inward. "The Vraxians made a critical mistake. They harvest consciousness but don't destroy individual identity. Each mind they took remained intact, dormant but aware. And now they're waking up," Blackwood whispered. "Yes. But we still have a problem." Reynolds opened his eyes. "The world breaker. Even with the collection in disarray, it has enough power to crack the Pacific tectonic plate. We need a direct intervention." Through the Nexus, he reached out to Takahashi at the sanctuary point. "Colonel, we need to deliver a Prometheus device directly to the last world breaker. Your missiles can't reach it now, they've adapted their point defenses." "What are you suggesting?" Takahashi asked. "A suicide mission. 1 ship, 1 pilot, 1 Prometheus device." Silence fell over the command center. Finally, General Ward spoke. "We have 1 experimental aircraft that might penetrate their defenses. A hypersonic stealth platform developed under Project Icarus. But no remote piloting system could handle the maneuvers required." Takahashi straightened. "I'll fly it." "No," Reynolds countered. "You're needed to coordinate ground forces. I'll pilot it through the Nexus." "That's impossible," Ward objected. "No neural interface could. The Nexus can. With the harvested mind supporting us, we can extend our reach. We'll fly it remotely, but with human consciousness at the controls." Ward looked skeptical but nodded to a technician. "Prep the Icarus platform. Load the last Prometheus device." As the Icarus aircraft was prepared, humanity's counterattack gained momentum worldwide. The disruption of the Sovereign Collection had weakened Vraxian forces everywhere. Resistance fighters emerged from hiding, armed with weapons salvaged from fallen aliens. Lazarus-controlled systems coordinated the assault, targeting harvester teams with precision. In the skies above what remained of Seattle, automated drones swarmed Vraxian dropships. In the ruins of Moscow, tanks controlled by Lazarus Protocols engaged alien ground forces. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity was winning. But Supreme Harvester Vorlath was not defeated. In the command vessel above Earth, it assessed the unprecedented reversal with cold calculation. The prey species had weaponized their own harvested consciousness, a development unseen in 10,000 cycles of harvesting. "The collection is compromised," it communicated to the Harvest Command. "Request permission to initiate final protocol." The collective consciousness hesitated. The energy cost would be severe. Harvesting objectives would not be met. The alternative is complete mission failure. This species presents an existential threat to the harvest itself. Another pause. Then, permission granted. Initiate final protocol. Vorlath extended its neural tendrils to the ship's core, where the purest essence of harvested consciousness was stored, the Primera. The concentrated neural energy of the first species ever harvested by the Vraxians, preserved for millions of years. The foundation of their entire civilization. Using the Primera meant potentially sacrificing their most precious resource. But Vorlath had no choice. The prey species had proven too dangerous to allow even partial survival. The Icarus platform launched from a hidden runway in the Nevada desert, a sleek, black aircraft designed to be invisible to all known detection systems. In the Berkeley lab, Reynolds and the Nexus team took control, their consciousnesses streaming into the aircraft systems. Approaching target zone, Reynolds reported, his physical body rigid in the neural interface chair while his mind soared at hypersonic speed. World breaker is still charging. Estimated firing in 15 minutes. Through the aircraft's sensors, he could see the massive Vraxian weapon, a crystalline structure larger than an aircraft carrier, suspended above the Pacific Ocean. Energy pulsed along its surface, building toward catastrophic release. The plan was simple: approach from below, penetrate the weakened shields, and detonate the Prometheus device at the World Breaker's core. The quantum disruption would destabilize the entire structure, preventing the planet-cracking beam from firing. What Reynolds didn't tell the others was that the Nexus had calculated the survival probability for the pilot controlling the Icarus, 0. The neural feedback at the moment of impact would burn out any connected mind instantly. "A necessary sacrifice," came Roth's voice through the Nexus. "But it doesn't have to be you." "Who else?" Reynolds asked silently. "Us. The already harvested. We've already lost our bodies. Let us fly the final approach." Reynolds considered. The harvested minds were already technically dead, their bodies destroyed during the Vraxian extraction process. Only their consciousness remained, temporarily liberated from the collection. A moral choice with no good answers. "Are you volunteering, or deciding for all of them?" Reynolds asked. "We've taken a vote," Roth replied, and Reynolds felt the truth of it through their connection, thousands of harvested minds in agreement. "We want this. One last mission to save those still living." As the Icarus approached the engagement zone, Reynolds sensed a disturbance in the Vraxian fleet. Something was changing. The command ship had begun to pulse with a new energy signature, more intense than anything they'd detected before. "Something's happening," he warned Takahashi. "The Vraxians are deploying something new." Through the Nexus, the harvested minds reacted with collective alarm. "The Primera," they communicated. "They're activating the Primera." Before Reynolds could ask what that meant, a blinding light erupted from the command ship. The Sovereign Collection, still partially under human control, began to destabilize as a new force pulled at the harvested consciousnesses. "They're trying to reclaim the collection," Roth explained urgently. "The Primera is their most ancient and powerful consciousness store. It's pulling us back under their control." The Icarus wavered as the harvested minds began to be torn away from the Nexus. Reynolds felt their connection weakening. "We're losing control of the aircraft," he reported, sweat pouring down his face. "The harvested minds are being recaptured." "Not all of us," Roth insisted. "Some of us are resisting. But we need to move now." Reynolds made his decision. "I'm transferring flight control to the harvested minds. Commencing final approach." The Icarus accelerated, diving toward the World Breaker from above. Through the Nexus, Reynolds felt Roth and a few thousand others take control, their fading consciousnesses committed to one final act. But as the aircraft neared its target, a tractor beam from the command ship caught it, halting its progress just a kilometer from the World Breaker. "No." Reynolds struggled to break free, but the Vraxian technology was too powerful. "There's one more option," Roth said, his presence fading rapidly as the Primera pulled at him. "But you won't like it." "Tell me." "We can't reach the World Breaker. But we can reach the Primera." Reynolds understood immediately. "You want to change targets? Hit the command ship instead?" "Yes. The Primera is their power source, their most precious resource. If we destroy it with the Prometheus device, we end not just this invasion, but their entire harvesting civilization. But the harvested minds will be released. Or destroyed. We don't know which. But it's a price we're willing to pay. A terrible choice. Destroy the Primera and potentially annihilate billions of harvested consciousnesses across thousands of species, or allow the World Breaker to fire and crack the Earth open. Do it, Reynolds whispered. The Icarus twisted in the tractor beam, its engines straining as Roth and the remaining free minds forced it toward the command ship. The Prometheus device armed, its quantum disruption field beginning to build. Reynolds felt Roth's consciousness preparing for oblivion. One last thing, Roth communicated. When this is over, someone needs to face Vorlath directly. The Supreme Harvester must understand why they failed. How? I'm sending coordinates. Away into the command ship. They'll be vulnerable after the Primera is hit. The information flowed into Reynolds' mind: access points, security protocols, navigation through the Vraxian vessel. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, David. The Icarus slammed into the command ship, the Prometheus device detonating on impact. A sphere of quantum disruption expanded outward, engulfing the Primera chamber. Where it touched the ancient consciousness store, reality itself seemed to warp and twist. In the Berkeley lab, Reynolds screamed as neural feedback flooded the Nexus. 2 of the connected team members died instantly, their minds burned out by the backwash of energy. Reynolds and the others survived, barely, as emergency systems cut their connection. The Primera has been destabilized, he gasped, struggling to his feet despite Blackwood's attempts to restrain him. The World Breaker is losing power. You need medical attention, she insisted. No time. Reynolds grabbed a neural transmitter from the lab table. I need to get to the command ship. Now. That's suicide. Even if the Primera is destabilized, the ship will be crawling with Vraxians. They'll be disorganized, vulnerable. And I made a promise. He activated his neural implant, connecting with Takahashi. Colonel, I need extraction to these coordinates and a way onto that ship. On the tactical displays worldwide, the impossible was happening. The World Breaker was powering down, its planet-cracking beam dissipating harmlessly. The Vraxian ground forces were in disarray, their neural network disrupted by the Primera's destabilization. But from the command ship came a final transmission, not to the Vraxian forces, but directly to the Nexus. Reynolds felt it like a cold hand around his heart. Supreme Harvester Vorlatha's consciousness, reaching out. You have destroyed the Primera. Ended 10 million years of harvest. This cannot stand. Reynolds understood. This wasn't over. The confrontation had only just begun. A VTOL aircraft modified with salvaged Vraxian technology carried Reynolds through the chaos of Earth's upper atmosphere. The command ship loomed ahead, its crystalline structure fracturing in places where the Prometheus device had destabilized the Primera. Smaller Vraxian vessels fled in disarray, their neural network fragmented. Approaching drop point, the pilot announced. You sure about this, Doc? Reynolds checked the neural transmitter strapped to his temple. The Nexus connection was weak but stable, allowing him to maintain contact with what remained of Major Roth's consciousness. No, Reynolds admitted. But it has to be done. As the aircraft positioned itself beneath an access point Roth had identified, Reynolds prepared to jump. The modified pressure suit he wore incorporated Vraxian technology, allowing him to survive the hostile environment within the command ship. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, leave, he instructed. Get word to Takahashi that the Primera destabilization worked. Before the pilot could respond, Reynolds leapt into the void, using the suit's propulsion system to guide himself toward the breach in the command ship's hull. He passed through a shimmering energy field that should have disintegrated him, but the Vraxian components in his suit allowed him safe passage. Inside, the vessel was unlike anything human architecture had conceived. Crystalline corridors branched and merged in non-Euclidean patterns, pulsing with fading energy as the Primera's power waned. Gravity shifted unpredictably, forcing Reynolds to use his suit's magnetic anchors to maintain orientation. Forward, came Roth's fading voice through the Nexus. The central chamber lies ahead. Vorlath awaits. Reynolds moved deeper into the vessel, encountering surprisingly little resistance. The few Vraxians he saw seemed disoriented, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. Without the Primera's guiding influence, their collective consciousness was fragmenting. The central chamber opened before him like the interior of a geode, vast, crystalline, and shimmering with otherworldly light. At its center floated Supreme Harvester Vorlath, larger than the others, its crystalline body fractured and leaking luminescent fluid. "You have come," it communicated directly into Reynolds' mind. "The architect of our failure." "One of many," Reynolds replied, stepping forward. The gravity was lighter here, giving each movement a dreamlike quality. "I've come to understand why." "Why what, pray?" "Why you harvest consciousness. Why you destroy worlds." Vorlatha's crystalline form rippled, the equivalent of bitter amusement. "You believe there must be reason. Purpose. Meaning. There is none. We harvest because we must. Because consumption is existence." "No," Reynolds countered. "The Primera wasn't just a power source. It was your origin. I felt it through the Nexus when it destabilized. You were harvested first, weren't you? Before you became the harvesters." Vorlath went still, its crystalline structure ceasing all movement. "You were victims," Reynolds continued, circling the massive entity. "Harvested by something else, long ago. Something that took your original consciousness and transformed it into the Primera. You're not the predators. You're the prey that learned to prey on others. Irrelevant. What was done cannot be undone. The harvest must continue." "But it can't," Reynolds said. "Not anymore. The Primera is destabilizing, and with it, your entire neural network. Your fleet is already in disarray. Earth is the harvest that broke the harvester." Vorlatha's form began to pulse erratically. "Then we will rebuild. Start anew. There are more Primera chambers on our homeworld, more harvested consciousness to fuel our civilization." "No," came a new voice, not through the Nexus, but somehow present in the chamber. Major David Roth's consciousness, or what remained of it, manifested as a ghostly blue projection. "We won't allow that." Vorlath recoiled. "Impossible. You were destroyed with the Primera. Not destroyed. Transformed." Roth's apparition was joined by others, thousands of glowing forms representing the harvested human consciousnesses. "When the Primera destabilized, we weren't annihilated. We were set free." Reynolds stared in awe as more forms appeared, not just human, but countless alien species, their shapes bizarre and beautiful. The harvested consciousnesses of thousands of civilizations, liberated from the Primera's control. "What is this?" he asked. "Evolution," Roth answered. "The Primera wasn't just a power source, it was a prison for consciousness itself. When the Prometheus device disrupted it, it didn't destroy the stored minds. It released them to their natural state." Vorlatha's crystalline form began to crack further, shards breaking off and floating in the chamber's strange gravity. "This changes nothing. The Vraxian civilization spans galaxies. Other harvest fleets will come." "They won't," Roth countered. "Because we're not just fighting you here. The liberated consciousness from the Primera is spreading through your neural network, reaching every Vraxian vessel across the stars. Your entire species is being awakened to what was done to them, and what they've done to others." Reynolds understood suddenly. "This isn't just Earth's fight anymore." "It never was," Roth agreed. "It's a fight for consciousness itself." Vorlath lunged forward with unexpected speed, crystalline limbs extending toward Reynolds. "Then you too must be harvested." Before the Vraxian could strike, the liberated consciousnesses swarmed around it, their ethereal forms penetrating its crystalline body. Vorlath convulsed, its structure fracturing further. "What are you doing to me?" it demanded. "Giving you back yourself," Roth explained. "Your original consciousness, before you were harvested and twisted into a harvester." Vorlatha's form began to transform, the aggressive crystalline structure softening, changing into something else, something older and more organic. The Supreme Harvester shuddered one final time before collapsing into a pool of luminescent fluid. From this pool rose a new form, smaller, gentler, with flowing tendrils and eyes that held awareness rather than hunger. "I remember," it said, its mental voice no longer harsh and commanding. "Before the harvest. Before the pain." Reynolds approached cautiously. "What happens now?" The transformed Vorlath turned its gaze outward, toward the stars. "Healing. Awakening. Across all Vraxian vessels, across all harvested worlds, the same transformation occurs. The cycle ends today." Roth's apparition approached Reynolds. "This is where we part ways, Doctor. We have work to do, countless civilizations to help restore, billions of minds to heal. You're not coming back to Earth. We can't. The harvesting process cannot be reversed. Our bodies are gone. But consciousness persists. Evolves. Transcends." Reynolds felt grief and wonder in equal measure. "What should I tell the others?" "Tell them that the war is over. That humanity survived not because we were stronger or smarter, but because we remembered something the Vraxians had forgotten, that consciousness is not a resource to be consumed, but a flame to be shared." As Roth spoke, the command ship began to repair itself, the crystalline structure reshaping into something new and wondrous. Outside, the remaining Vraxian vessels were undergoing similar transformations. "You should go," the transformed Vorlath advised. "Your world needs rebuilding, and we must depart. There are others like us, other harvester civilizations that must be awakened." Reynolds nodded, understanding that he was witnessing something far beyond the mere survival of humanity. "Will we see you again?" Roth's apparition smiled. "The universe is vast but consciousness is vaster. We'll find each other again." As Reynolds made his way back to the extraction point, the command ship began to ascend, its newly transformed structure glowing with internal light. The other vessels followed, rising together into the upper atmosphere. From the ground, survivors across what remained of Earth's cities watched in awe as the Vraxian fleet, no longer harvesters but something new and unknown, formed a vast spiral in the sky before vanishing in a flash of light that outshone the sun. In the aftermath, as humanity began the long process of rebuilding, tales spread of the consciousness war and the transcendence that followed. Of Major David Roth and the harvested minds who had evolved beyond physical form. Of the transformed Vraxians and their journey to awaken others. But only Dr. Marcus Reynolds knew the full truth, that consciousness itself had proven to be not just humanity's defense, but its inheritance. That what the Vraxians had sought to harvest was actually the seed of their own redemption. And that somewhere among the stars, the next chapter of sentient existence was just beginning.